The sound of 300 people gasping in unison is something you never forget. It's like the air being sucked out of a cathedral, leaving nothing but the echo of my own heartbeat and the rustle of my wedding dress as I collapse to my knees on the cold marble steps. "Stop! Marcus, please!" The words tear from my throat, raw and desperate, but he doesn't even pause. His broad shoulders, the ones I used to trace with my fingertips during lazy Sunday mornings, remain rigid as he walks away from me, away from us, away from the life we were supposed to build together. "You're not the woman I thought I married, Clara." His voice carries through the cathedral like a death sentence, each word a nail in the coffin of everything I believed in. The massive oak doors slam shut behind him with a finality that makes my chest cave in, and suddenly I'm alone. Alone with my mother's scandalized gasp from the front pew, alone with his secretary's smug little smile as she adjusts her perfectly pressed blazer, alone with the weight of white lace and broken promises. But let me back up, because you need to understand something crucial about that day, about me. My name is Clara Thompson, and until 30 minutes ago, I thought I was about to become Clara Mitchell. I thought I was marrying the love of my life, a successful businessman who swept me off my feet with expensive dinners and weekend getaways to the Hamptons. I thought I knew the man standing at the altar, waiting for me with that crooked smile that made my knees weak. I was wrong about everything. The morning started like a fairy tale. My bridesmaids fluttered around me like butterflies, adjusting my veil, touching up my makeup, telling me how radiant I looked. Sarah, my maid of honour, kept gushing about how lucky I was, how Marcus was every woman's dream man. "He's so successful, so handsome, so devoted to you," she kept saying while pinning pearls into my hair. If only I'd known that devotion was a mask he wore like his expensive cologne, something he put on to hide what was rotting underneath. The first crack in my perfect world appeared when I was walking down the aisle. Marcus was standing there in his tailored tuxedo, but something was off. His jaw was clenched, his hands were shaking, and when our eyes met, I didn't see love. I saw guilt, fear. I couldn't place it then, but now I know exactly what I was seeing. The face of a man about to destroy someone he claimed to love. The ceremony was supposed to be simple. Traditional vows, exchanging rings, a kiss to seal our forever. But when the minister asked if anyone had any objections, that's when my world imploded. "I do." The voice came from the back of the cathedral, crisp and professional. I turned, my bouquet trembling in my hands, to see a woman in a severe black suit walking down the aisle like she owned the place. Behind her, 2 men in matching suits followed, their badges glinting in the stained glass light. "FBI," she announced, her voice carrying to every corner of the sacred space. "Marcus Mitchell, you're under arrest for embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy to commit money laundering." The cathedral erupted. Guests were standing, shouting, some running for the exits like the building was on fire. But I couldn't move. I stood there in my white dress, watching the man I loved get handcuffed at our own altar, and I still didn't understand. "There's been a mistake," I whispered, but no one heard me over the chaos. That's when Marcus turned to me, his wrists bound behind his back, and said the words that would haunt me forever. "You're not the woman I thought I married, Clara. If you were, you'd have known what I was doing. You'd have been smart enough to see through me." "What are you talking about?" I reached for him, but one of the agents stepped between us. "Your fiancé has been stealing from his clients for 3 years, the female agent explained, not unkindly. "Over $2 million funneled through offshore accounts. We have evidence of falsified documents, bribed officials, and a network of accomplices." The words hit me like physical blows. $2 million. 3 years. The entire time we'd been together, he'd been living a lie, and I'd been nothing but a convenient cover story, the naive girlfriend who made him look respectable and trustworthy. But here's the part that really destroyed me, the detail that still makes my blood run cold when I think about it. As they were leading Marcus away, his secretary, that perfectly composed woman who'd been helping me plan our honeymoon just last week, leaned over and whispered in my ear, "Did you really think a man like Marcus would marry a nobody like you for love?" Her breath smelled like peppermint and poison. "You were useful, Clara. A pretty little prop to make him look like a family man while he built his real fortune. But props get discarded when the show is over." That's when I ran. I hiked up my dress and ran down that aisle, past the agents, past the reporters who'd somehow already appeared, past my mother calling my name. I burst through those cathedral doors and kept running, my heels clicking against the pavement like a broken metronome. I made it exactly 4 blocks before the truck ran the red light. I remember the sound of screeching brakes, the smell of burning rubber, the way time seemed to slow down as I realised what was about to happen. I remember thinking, absurdly, that I was going to die in my wedding dress and my mother would have to bury me in white lace stained with mascara and betrayal. The last thing I saw was Marcus's secretary standing on the cathedral steps, watching me with that same smug smile, like she'd orchestrated this entire disaster just to see me fall. Then everything went black. But death, as it turns out, was just the beginning of my story. Because when I opened my eyes again, I wasn't in heaven or hell or some peaceful afterlife where broken hearts get mended. I was in my cramped studio apartment, the one I'd lived in before Marcus convinced me to move in with him. The one I'd given up 3 years ago when I thought I was trading up for a better life. The clock on my nightstand read 6:47 a.m, and the date made my heart stop. It was exactly 3 years earlier. 3 years before that nightmare wedding. 3 years before I learned what Marcus really was. 3 years before I died alone on 5th Avenue with rice still in my hair. But here's the thing about coming back from the dead. You remember everything. Every lie he told me, every client he stole from, every night he came home late, with stories about emergency meetings that I now knew were sessions with his secretary and his criminal partners. I remembered the offshore account numbers I'd glimpsed on his computer screen, the hushed phone calls he thought I couldn't hear, the way he always steered me away from certain topics and certain people. Most importantly, I remembered the names. All of them. I sat up in my tiny bed, in my tiny apartment with my giant rage and my perfect memory, and I smiled. Marcus Mitchell thought he'd destroyed Clara Thompson when he left her at that altar. He thought he'd killed the naive girl who believed in love and happy endings. He was right. That girl was dead. But the woman who'd taken her place? She was something much more dangerous. She was someone with nothing left to lose and everything to gain. Someone who knew exactly how his criminal empire worked and exactly how to tear it down piece by piece. Someone who had 1,095 days to plan the perfect revenge. The game was about to begin, and this time I wasn't playing to win Marcus's heart. I was playing to destroy his entire world. The first thing I did was laugh. Not a happy laugh, a cold, calculating laugh that would have terrified the old Clara. I was sitting in my studio apartment, staring at the phone that would ring in exactly 17 minutes with Marcus's first call, and I was laughing because I finally understood the rules of the game. I'd been playing blind for 3 years, but this time I held all the cards. When the phone rang, I let it go to voicemail. Then I listened to Marcus's voice, that smooth baritone that used to make me melt, as he left a message about taking me to dinner at Chez Laurent, the same restaurant where he'd first told me he loved me. In my original timeline, I'd said yes immediately, giddy with excitement. This time, I waited 6 hours before calling back. "Clara, sweetheart, I was starting to worry you'd changed your mind about me," he said when he picked up, and I could hear the relief in his voice. "Just wanted to make sure you were serious," I replied, injecting just enough playful uncertainty into my tone. "A girl can't be too careful these days." He laughed, probably thinking I was being adorably naive. If only he knew I was already 3 steps ahead of his game. That dinner was fascinating in ways it had never been before. I watched Marcus like a scientist studying a specimen, cataloguing every micro-expression, every calculated gesture. When he talked about his import business, I nodded with wide-eyed admiration while mentally noting which details he was lying about. When he mentioned his secretary, Victoria, I giggled and asked innocent questions that made him reveal far more than he intended. "She sounds wonderful," I said, twirling my wineglass. "I'd love to meet her sometime." "Oh, Victoria's very professional. I don't think you two would have much in common," he replied quickly, and I filed away his discomfort for later use. But the real breakthrough came 3 weeks later, when I accidentally bumped into him at his office building during lunch. This had never happened in my original timeline, because I'd been too respectful of his boundaries, too willing to wait for him to invite me into his world. This time, I was done waiting for invitations. "Clara, what a surprise," Marcus said, though his smile was strained. "What brings you downtown?" "Job interview at the marketing firm across the street," I lied smoothly. "I thought maybe we could grab lunch." That's when I met Victoria Chen for the first time. Really met her, not just the glimpse I'd caught at the wedding. She was everything I remembered. Sharp, beautiful, and radiating the kind of confidence that comes from holding other people's secrets. But this time, I was ready for her. "You must be Clara," she said, extending a perfectly manicured hand. "Marcus has told me so much about you." "All good things, I hope," I replied, matching her smile with one of my own. But I was studying her, memorizing everything. The way she stood just a little too close to Marcus, the expensive watch on her wrist that definitely wasn't paid for by a secretary's salary, and most importantly, the moment of calculation in her eyes when she looked at me. She was deciding whether I was a threat. In my original timeline, she'd correctly assessed that I wasn't. This time, she was making the same mistake Marcus was making, underestimating me completely. Over the next few months, I played the role of the perfect girlfriend with Academy Award-worthy precision. I was supportive, but not clingy, interested, but not intrusive, ambitious, but not threatening. I got a job at a small investment firm, not because I needed the money, but because I needed to understand how Marcus's world really worked. Every day, I learned something new about offshore banking, shell companies, and the intricate ways money could disappear and reappear in different forms. My co-workers thought I was naturally gifted at spotting financial irregularities. If only they knew I had 3 years of insider knowledge guiding every observation. The breakthrough came when Marcus made his first major mistake. He invited me to a company party, the same party where, in my original timeline, I'd been charmed by his colleagues and impressed by his success. This time, I was hunting for weaknesses. "Clara, I'd like you to meet James Hartwell," Marcus said, introducing me to a distinguished older man with silver hair and expensive tastes. "James is one of our biggest clients." James Hartwell, the name I'd been waiting to hear. In my original timeline, I'd never connected the dots, but now I knew exactly who he was. The man whose pension fund Marcus had been systematically draining for 2 years. The man whose life savings would disappear completely if Marcus's scheme wasn't stopped. "Mr. Hartwell, what a pleasure," I said, shaking his hand while my mind raced. "Marcus has told me so much about your business relationship." "Has he now?" James smiled, but there was something sharp in his eyes. "I hope he's mentioned what a careful eye I keep on my investments." The warning was subtle, but I caught it. James Hartwell was already suspicious. He just didn't have proof yet. That's when I made my first real move in the game. "You know, Mr. Hartwell, I work in investment analysis myself," I said casually. "If you ever want a second opinion on your portfolio performance, I'd be happy to take a look. Fresh eyes and all that." Marcus's hand tightened on my arm, a warning I pretended not to understand. But James looked intrigued. That's very kind of you, miss. Thompson, Clara Thompson, and I mean it. I love analysing investment patterns. It's like solving puzzles. By the time we left the party, I had James Hartwell's business card and a lunch appointment for the following week. Marcus was quiet during the drive home, and when we got to his apartment, he finally exploded. "What the hell was that, Clara?" "What was what?" I asked, all innocence. "You can't just offer to audit my client's accounts. That's completely inappropriate." "I was just being friendly," I said, letting my voice waver just enough to suggest hurt feelings. "I thought you'd be proud of me for taking an interest in your work." He softened immediately, pulling me into his arms. "I am proud of you, sweetheart. There are boundaries in business, you know? Client confidentiality and all that." "Of course," I murmured against his chest. "I'm sorry if I overstepped." But I wasn't sorry. I was exhilarated. Because Marcus had just confirmed what I'd suspected. He was terrified of anyone looking too closely at his business practices. And now I had direct access to his biggest victim. The lunch with James Hartwell was a masterclass in controlled revelation. I'd spent days preparing, using my inside knowledge to ask exactly the right questions in exactly the right way. Within an hour, I had him questioning investment returns that had seemed too good to be true, pointing out discrepancies in quarterly reports that he'd overlooked, and most importantly, planting seeds of doubt about the man he'd trusted with his future. "You know, Clara," he said as we finished our coffee, "you have quite an eye for detail. Have you ever considered going into financial investigation?" "Actually," I said, playing my next card perfectly, "I've been thinking about getting my CPA certification, but I'd need to understand how different types of fraud work to really excel in forensic accounting." His eyes lit up. "I might know someone who could help you with that. Have you ever heard of the FBI's Financial Crimes Division?" 3 days later, I was sitting in a coffee shop across from Special Agent Sarah Chen. No relation to Victoria, just a cosmic coincidence that almost made me believe in fate. Agent Chen was young, ambitious, and very interested in my theoretical questions about investment fraud patterns. "These are very sophisticated scenarios you're asking about," she said, studying my notebook. "Are you working on a case study for school?" "Something like that," I replied. "I find it fascinating how criminals think they can hide money trails when everything leaves a digital footprint." "Exactly. Most financial criminals are undone by their own arrogance. They think they're smarter than the system, but they always make mistakes. Always." By the time I left that coffee shop, I had Agent Chen's card, a reading list of financial crime case studies, and most importantly, I had planted the idea that someone should be looking into theoretical fraud patterns that matched Marcus's operation exactly. 6 months into my second chance at life, I was no longer the naive girl who'd fallen for Marcus's lies. I was a woman with a plan, resources, and connections that he couldn't even imagine. I was building my own network while systematically dismantling his sense of security. But the best part, he still thought I was completely under his spell. Every night, as he held me close and whispered about our future together, I smiled in the darkness and counted down the days until his world would collapse. 1,095 days had become 732 days, and I was just getting started. The foundation was laid. Now it was time to start building the trap that would destroy Marcus Mitchell once and for all. The night Marcus proposed to me again, I said yes with tears in my eyes. Real tears, because I knew exactly what those tears meant in my original timeline. They were tears of joy that had turned to tears of humiliation. But this time, they were tears of anticipation, because I knew his proposal was actually the beginning of his end. "You've made me the happiest man alive, Clara," he whispered, slipping the same diamond ring onto my finger, that I'd worn to my own destruction. I can't wait to spend forever with you. Forever. The word tasted like poison on my tongue, but I smiled and kissed him like it was the sweetest promise ever made. That was month 8 of my 109 5-day plan, and everything was accelerating perfectly. The morning after his proposal, I made a call that would have been impossible in my original timeline. I dialed a number I'd memorized from Agent Chen's business card and requested a meeting that would change everything. Agent Chen, this is Clara Thompson. I think I found something you need to see. We met at the same coffee shop, but this time I wasn't asking theoretical questions. This time I had a manila folder thick with evidence I'd been collecting for 8 months, bank statements I'd photographed while Marcus was in the shower, email printouts I'd made during his business trips, and most damning of all, recorded conversations I'd captured during his late-night phone calls with Victoria. Clara, how did you obtain these documents? Agent Chen asked, her professional mask slipping as she realised what she was looking at. My fiancé is Marcus Mitchell, I said simply, watching her face change as the pieces clicked into place. And I think he's been using me as cover while he steals from his clients. It was a beautiful lie, wrapped in just enough truth to be believable. I played the role of the concerned fiancé who'd stumbled onto something terrible, not the calculating woman who'd been orchestrating his downfall for months. Agent Chen bought it completely, especially when I broke down crying, on cue, about how betrayed I felt. We'll need you to wear a wire, she said after reviewing everything. Can you do that? It could be dangerous if he finds out. I'll do whatever it takes, I replied, and I meant every word. But wearing the wire was just the beginning. While the FBI was building their case with my help, I was executing the second phase of my plan, destroying Marcus's personal relationships and professional reputation simultaneously. The first target was his business partner, David Langston. In my original timeline, David had been shocked by Marcus's arrest, claiming he knew nothing about the fraud. This time, I made sure David knew exactly what Marcus was doing, and made sure he had reasons to turn against him. It started with a chance encounter at David's favourite restaurant. I'd learned his schedule, his habits, his weaknesses, and I used all of it. David was a gambling man with expensive tastes, and a wife who monitored his every expense. Perfect. David, what a coincidence, I said, approaching his table with a bright smile. Marcus talks about you all the time. Clara, right? The famous fiancé, he said, gesturing to the empty chair across from him. Join me for a drink? 3 drinks later, David was complaining about cash flow problems and his wife's spending habits. 4 drinks later, he was asking if I knew anything about Marcus's creative accounting methods. By the end of the evening, I'd planted seeds of suspicion about Marcus's loyalty to their partnership and offered David a solution to his money problems, if he was willing to look the other way on certain business practices. You know, David, I said, leaning forward conspiratorially, Marcus mentioned that you're brilliant with numbers. He said if anyone could figure out how to make money disappear and reappear in the right places, it would be you. The bait was set. Within a week, David was asking Marcus pointed questions about client accounts and offshore transfers. Within 2 weeks, they were having screaming matches that I could hear through Marcus's office door. Within a month, David was calling Agent Chen with his own concerns about his business partner's activities. But my masterpiece was Victoria Chen, sweet, manipulative Victoria, who thought she was so much smarter than everyone around her. She had no idea she was about to become the star witness in Marcus's downfall. I started by becoming her friend. It was easier than I'd expected. Victoria was lonely beneath all that polished perfection, and she was thrilled to have another woman in Marcus's orbit who seemed to genuinely like her. We had lunch dates, shopping trips, and long conversations about men, careers, and ambition. You're so lucky, Clara, she said during one of our shopping expeditions. Marcus is completely devoted to you. Some men, they use women, you know. They make promises they never intend to keep. Has someone hurt you, Victoria? I asked, playing the concerned friend perfectly. Not hurt, exactly, but I've learned that powerful men always have secrets. The smart women are the ones who learn those secrets and use them to protect themselves. That's when I knew she was ready for the trap I'd been preparing. Can I tell you something in confidence? I said, lowering my voice like we were teenage girls sharing secrets. I think Marcus might be hiding something from me. Financial something. I found some papers in his home office that looked questionable. Victoria's eyes sharpened with interest. What kind of papers? Bank statements, account numbers, names I don't recognise. It's probably nothing, but I let my voice trail off, that the picture of worried innocence. Clara, honey, if you're concerned about your financial future with Marcus, maybe you should know what you're getting into, Victoria said, taking the bait exactly as I'd hoped. What if I told you there might be ways to secure your position, regardless of what Marcus might be hiding? And just like that, Victoria Chen began recruiting me into Marcus's money laundering operation. She thought she was protecting herself by bringing me into the conspiracy, making me complicit so I couldn't betray them later. She had no idea she was confessing to federal crimes while wearing a wire. The recordings I made during those conversations were pure gold. Victoria detailing how the offshore accounts worked, explaining the shell companies, even bragging about how they'd been moving money for years without getting caught. She thought she was impressing me with her sophistication. Instead, she was handing me everything I needed to destroy her and Marcus, simultaneously. But the most satisfying moment came when I finally got to execute the part of my plan I'd been dreaming about since the day I woke up in that cramped apartment. Marcus had been acting strange for weeks. Paranoid, jumpy, suspicious of everyone around him. His partnership with David was crumbling. His clients were asking uncomfortable questions, and he was starting to realise that his perfect life was developing cracks. But he still trusted me completely. The night before the FBI raid, I lay in bed next to him, listening to him breathe, knowing it was the last time he'd sleep peacefully for years. When he woke up, I was already dressed, making coffee in his kitchen like it was just another morning. "You're up early," he said, wrapping his arms around me from behind. "Couldn't sleep," I replied, leaning back against him. "I keep having this dream that everything we've built together is about to disappear." "That's not going to happen," he said firmly. "I won't let anything hurt us, Clara. I promise." "Do you ever think about the people who get hurt when powerful men make promises they can't keep?" I asked, turning in his arms to look at him directly. Something flickered in his eyes. Confusion, maybe even a hint of fear. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if someone you trusted completely, someone who loved you more than life itself, what if they turned out to be playing a completely different game than you thought?" For just a moment, I saw recognition dawn in his expression. For just a moment, Marcus Mitchell, the man who thought he was smarter than everyone, who thought he could use people and discard them without consequences, realised he might have made a terrible mistake. But it was too late. The FBI was already surrounding the building, Agent Chen was already reading the warrant, and Victoria was already in handcuffs, screaming about how this was all a setup. As I watched Marcus get arrested for the second time in my life, I felt something I'd never expected to feel in this moment. I felt empty, because revenge, as it turns out, tastes nothing like you think it will. And I was about to learn that some games have rules that even the players don't understand. 3 months after Marcus's arrest, I should have been celebrating. I had everything I dreamed of, a corner office in a prestigious investment firm, a penthouse apartment, and a custom-tailored power suit that cost more than Marcus's car. I'd built an empire on the ashes of his reputation, and every financial magazine in the city was calling me a genius for uncovering one of the biggest fraud schemes in recent history. But the emptiness I'd felt during his arrest had grown into something darker, something that whispered to me in the quiet moments that this victory was too easy, too perfect, too exactly what I'd planned. That's when I decided to visit him in prison. The federal detention centre smelled like disinfectant and desperation. I walked through those corridors in my designer heels, my blood-red lipstick and my perfectly styled hair, looking like everything Marcus had lost. The guards recognised me as the whistleblower who'd brought down the Mitchell fraud case, and they treated me with respectful deference. 5 minutes, the guard said, unlocking the door to the visitation room. Marcus looked different. Not broken like I'd expected, not defeated. He looked like a man who'd been waiting for something, and when he saw me, he smiled. That same crooked smile that had made me fall in love with him in another lifetime. "Hello, Clara," he said, settling into the plastic chair across from me. "I was wondering when you'd come." "I needed to see you destroyed," I said, crossing my legs and studying his face. "I needed to see what justice looked like." "Justice," he repeated, and then he laughed, actually laughed. "Is that what you think this is?" "I think this is exactly what you deserve," I replied, but something cold was creeping up my spine. "You used me, Marcus. You made me believe you loved me while you were stealing from innocent people." "I did love you," he said quietly. "That was the problem. Stop lying. Even now, even in here, you're still lying." "Clara, sweetheart, I need you to think very carefully about what happened 3 years ago. Not the timeline you've been living in, but the original one. The one where I left you at the altar." My blood turned to ice. "What did you just say?" "I said I need you to remember the truth about that wedding day, because you've been so focused on your revenge that you never asked the most important question. Why did I really leave you there?" The room started spinning. "You left me because you were exposed, because the FBI was coming for you." "No, Clara, I left you because I knew they were coming for you too." The words hit me like a physical blow. "That's impossible. I didn't know anything about your crimes." "Didn't you?" His brown eyes were gentle now, almost pitying. "Think harder, sweetheart. Think about the bank statements you found in my office, the ones you brought to the FBI this time around. Where exactly did you find them?" I photographed them while you were in the shower," I whispered, but even as I said it, I knew it was a lie. In my original timeline, I'd never found those documents by accident. "You found them because you were looking for them, because James Hartwell had already approached you about irregularities in his account, because you'd already been meeting with Agent Chen for weeks before our wedding." "No," I said, but my voice was shaking. "No, that's not what happened." "Clara, in our original timeline, you weren't the naive girlfriend who got blindsided by my arrest. You were my partner. You were the one who suggested the offshore accounts. You were the one who recruited Victoria. You were the one who came up with the plan to use your innocence as cover while we built our empire together." The visitation room was silent except for the sound of my heart pounding. "You're lying." "Am I?" "Then explain how you knew exactly which documents to photograph this time. Explain how you knew Victoria's weaknesses so perfectly. Explain how you knew David's gambling habits and James's suspicions." I learned all of that because I was paying attention." "You learned it because you lived it. Because in our original timeline, you were the mastermind and I was the front man. We were partners, Clara. In crime, in love, in everything." The memories came flooding back then, like a dam bursting in my mind. Not the sanitized version I'd been telling myself, but the truth. The real truth. I remembered the night I'd first suggested using Marcus's charm to attract wealthy clients. I remembered designing the shell company structure that would hide our money trails. I remembered the thrill I'd felt when our first major theft succeeded. The rush of power that came with outsmarting people who thought they were smarter than us. But you left me, I whispered. At the altar. You said I wasn't the woman you thought you married. I left you because I found out you were planning to betray me. Victoria told me about your meetings with the FBI, about how you were going to pin everything on me and walk away clean. You were going to let me take the fall for crimes we committed together. That's not... I wouldn't you? Think about what you've done in this timeline, Clara. You used your knowledge of our crimes to destroy me while building yourself up as the hero. You manipulated everyone around me, turned my friends against me, and fed information to the FBI while pretending to love me. If that's not betrayal, what is... I stood up so fast the chair fell backward. I did it because you destroyed me, because you left me to die. I left you because you were going to destroy me first. Marcus stood too, his eyes blazing. But here's the thing, sweetheart. I remember dying too. I remember the shank that found my ribs in the prison shower 3 months after my arrest. I remember bleeding out on those cold tiles while thinking about how much I'd loved you and how completely you'd betrayed me. The room was spinning faster now. You came back too? We both did. We both got a second chance. The question is, what are we going to do with it? What do you mean? Marcus reached into his prison uniform and pulled out a small device I recognized immediately. A recording device, the same type I'd been using to gather evidence against him. I mean, I've been recording our conversation, Clara. I've been recording all of our conversations since this timeline began. Because unlike you, I didn't want revenge. I wanted evidence. Evidence of what? Evidence that Clara Thompson, the celebrated financial investigator, the hero who exposed the Mitchell fraud case, is actually the real mastermind behind the entire operation. Evidence that she used her second chance at life not to make amends, but to perfect her crimes and destroy everyone who could expose her. The blood drained from my face. No one will believe you. You're a convicted criminal. Maybe not, but they'll believe the recordings. They'll believe the detailed knowledge you've shown of crimes you claim to have discovered by accident. They'll believe the pattern of manipulation and betrayal that you've displayed toward everyone who trusted you. You can't prove any of this. Can't I? Agent Chen is already asking questions about how you knew so much about our operation. James Hartwell is wondering why you were so perfectly positioned to expose crimes that hurt him specifically. Victoria is telling anyone who will listen that you knew details about our money laundering that she never told you. I backed toward the door, but Marcus's voice followed me. There's something else, Clara. Something you haven't figured out yet. If we both came back, if we both remember the original timeline, then someone else knows about our crimes. Someone who has the power to send us back, to give us second chances, to manipulate our memories. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that this isn't really a second chance at all. This is a test. Someone is watching us, studying us, seeing what we'll do when we have the power to change our fate. And you, my dear, have failed spectacularly. The door opened behind me, and I turned to see Agent Chen standing there with handcuffs in her hands. Clara Thompson, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, money laundering, and obstruction of justice. As the handcuffs clicked around my wrists, Marcus leaned back in his chair and smiled that crooked smile one more time. Checkmate, sweetheart. Thanks for playing. But as they led me away, I heard him whisper something that made my blood run cold. See you in the next timeline. Because if Marcus was right, if this was all just a test, then our game was far from over. And next time, I'd be ready for him. After all, I'd learned something valuable from this experience. If you're going to betray someone, make sure they stay dead. The real question was, who was keeping score